Win, fall, one, and for we run, we win. This is your friend James. Reverse democracy. Now, we want to talk about reverse democracy because inside of a republic like the United States of America, or the old Athenian things where everybody, all the citizens came and vote, there's this democracy is the will of the people gets done. But what we have in the United States of America and other places is called reverse democracy. Now, reverse democracy is a perversion of the legislative prudence. It's a mockery of public opinion, and it's a cesspool of selfishness. And what happens? What is this reverse democracy? Reverse democracy is when you, instead of taking the will of the people, you flip it over and do the will of an individual. And that's basically how monarchies start and, dictators start too. But, so what is it? We don't like the outcome of a vote. Sue. This particular state in the United States of America put something up for vote. The people voted. And instead of, instead of respecting this particular vote, they just sued. And then they sued and sued and sued. And just till they find a wicked judge that'll let them do whatever they want to do. These are three problems with this, is one, it ignores the will of the people. Now, this is very, very important. It ignores the will of the people. Now, judges are there designed to make individual rulings, not case law. That's made up. That's junk. That's a lie. But it's supposed to take individual. They take a law, make an individual ruling, and that's it. Okay, this person wants to do this. We decide in these circumstances they can do this. Of course, they should just be doing whatever the law says. But what it does, that's what a judge should do. But reverse democracy, a judge ignores the will of the people. 75 million people voted and said they don't want this, and the judge says no. Just like that one state who the people said, let's get rid of this particular thing, this fee for whatever, for this thing, and I don't want to say what it is. I'm keeping myself from saying it so you don't know what state it is. But every time the people voted, someone sued and it ignored the people's vote. So what it does is it ignores the will of the people. When people sign a petition saying end the lockdowns and stuff like that, and people say we need to go back to work, ignoring, immature people ignore, immature politicians ignore. And this reverse democracy ignores the will of the people because it uses the judicial system that is not, for a purpose it's not supposed to use it for. And they just keep spending money because they don't want to deal with the will of the people. The will of people wanted to do something, say the will of the people of a town want a nativity scene and want to say a prayer at school. And some wicked person doesn't want that, so they ignore the will of the people. The law has been passed. That's bad business. That's a reverse democracy because you're reversing the will of the people. Secondly, it perverts the judicial system to mere activism. The judicial system is not for activism. The judicial system is only to look at law, interpret it, be done. What does this law say? Not what you think it says. What does this law say? What does the law of gravity say? As a judge, you analyze a law as written, just like the law of gravity. You went to this, so in all actuality, it's not even interpreting law. It's just, what does the law say? Did they break it? Yes or no? It's not, they didn't, they killed somebody, but we want to say they're mentally defect, so they're not guilty. No, if they killed, whether they're 14 or 40, they killed, they murdered. That's law, not interpretation, whatever. So it turns into, that's how it moves into activism. Oh, I don't like this law. I never liked this law. And now that I'm a judge, I can do whatever I want to and change this law and ignore the will of the people. That's total pride. It's arrogancy. And it turns the judicial seat, this honorable position that God has created, judges. That's why we have a whole book called Judges. That's why the kings were in Israel. They judged. Their people were supposed to be, even with Moses, before his father-in-law came, all the people came to get to know, to know what the law, what God had to say about things, and he would judge the people. Judging is a very holy, respected position, and it's not for activism. It's not for some wicked judge who doesn't like this. It's not for some righteous judge to mess with stuff either. But the whole concept of judging came from the Bible. The whole concept of all this stuff is so someone who knows better can make a proper, just judge and balance. And activism is when you mess with the balance. You tip the scales. The Bible says you're not supposed to take bribes. The Bible says you're not supposed to regard the rich. You're not supposed to regard the poor. So you can't let the person off because their dad's on the board of the college. And you can't let the little person off who, you know, burnt their tongue on that piece of steak just because they're poor. And you like sticking it to the man. That's activism. That's not what the judicial system's for. It has no place in it. You're out of line if you do it, judge. Secondly, finally, it gives prideful judges the idea that they are somehow now part of the legislative branch. In the United States of America, and in most general countries seems now, there's an executive branch, a judicial branch, and a legislative branch. Actually, the legislative branch and the Constitution is at the top. Then we have the executive branch, and then we have the judicial branch. And the judicial branch, you go read to see, it's not what most of them are using it for. But it somehow, when you start playing with reverse democracy and sue to change laws and stuff like that, that people have been legitimately established, there's nothing wrong with it, the general population, especially when it comes to morality and things like that, and it turns and it just gives the judge, a prideful judge, they start thinking they're part of the legislative branch. Oh, it's my job. I saw that TV show. I used to like watching it too. It went for like 20 seasons. I guess it's time for me to establish new law. No, you're out of line. That's not your job. Your job is not to make law. The legislative branch makes law. The executive branch executes the law. That's why the police are part of the executive branch. And the judicial branch, their job is to deal with grievances. People like to say interpret law, but really it's just to deal with grievances when when someone doesn't know what to do, then you have the elders of the city. But they bring it to the elders of the city, they do diligent stuff, and the judge, does that. Diligent, it was talking about a murderer. They do diligent inquiry, and then they decide if the person's a murderer or not. But this is where legislature, where a judge, a wicked judge, starts thinking they're part of the legislative branch because they don't like the idea of execution. Well, God instituted execution, but they don't like the idea, so they're going to start thinking that now they're part of the legislative branch, so they're going to pass a law. This is where case law comes in. Case law does not exist. Case law is a lie. Case law is a fib. Case law is a perverted idea that somehow now judges can fix what the lawmakers didn't do. No, judges, you can't. Just because some wicked judge let some wicked person off does not mean now, that's what another wicked judge will now be like, oh yeah, this wicked judge did this, so now I can do whatever I want to do. Well, guess what? I'm certain you can find cases where a wicked judge let him off and a righteous judge didn't. And that's where case law comes from. You start thinking now you're a part of the legislative branch and you're not. The judges in Israel did not change the Bible. They did not change the Ten Commandments for what they wanted and stuff like that. So that's what happens when you start playing with democracy, reverse democracy, when you start ignoring the will of the people and you start perverting the judge seat to mere activism, then you get into judges. Now they think they're able to do a lot of other stuff. Judges, stay in your lane. Live will be.